It all started when my wife and I first visited her mother's new house. Her mother had remarried and lived in a decent-sized house out in Palm Desert. We would visit them when I had time off from work. I had taken a shower in the guest bathroom, and when I got out, amongst the fog over the mirror, there were 2 children's handprints. At first I thought it was a print from her 3-year-old sister, we'll call her Emily, and when I was done, we brought her in to see if she had done it. The prints were at least twice as big as hers, looking like they belonged to a little kid that was maybe around 8 years old. My father-in-law after this incident tells us that a little boy haunts the house as a joke. He says when his own sons were young, he saw a kid run into the kitchen while watching TV. Thinking it was his son, he got up and walked towards where the boy ran. When he opened his son's room, they were both asleep. Any kid can pretend to be asleep, which he didn't think much of. The next few times we come, Emily started to talk about her imaginary friend, and we ask who it is, and she says the word ghost, which is something we've never talked about around her. We ask where this ghost is, and she goes where her room is and points to the middle of the floor and proceeds to lay down like she's dead. We laugh nervously now, thinking there's an actual ghost here that's harmless, but it got worse. Around February, I had to go away to work for 3 weeks. My wife stayed over at her mom's during my absence with our 2-month-old son. We'll call him David. She tells me one night at around 4 a.m. she's feeding David, and she's starting to drift off to sleep. All of a sudden, the door to the bedroom starts to creak open, and she sees the arm of a little kid follow it. The door closes, and she hears footsteps run and slam another door. This can't be her Emily, because she's asleep with her mom. It's now June, and we came to pick up her sister for 2 weeks, and that night, as we were asleep, my wife had a very realistic dream. In her dream, we had gotten into a fight, and when I left, she was now in a hot tub of water holding something down, like a child drowning. She says she prayed to Michael the Archangel for protection, but before it ended, she heard a very dark voice whisper in her ear, "You're doing great." 2 weeks later, we come back to drop off Emily, and she had a dream that night of a little kid whispering in her ear and laughing. Her mom then tells us a month before she was sleeping and heard the same thing, except the child says, "Billy is coming." Then she hears heavy footsteps coming down the hall and feels her leg go numb, followed by a heavy hit in her chest that blacks her out. I'm not sure what this is or what's in the house. I'm honestly scared for them and my child when going over there. If anyone knows how I can ward off whatever is in that house, it would be greatly appreciated. I work at a nickel arcade. All my coworkers and I were just going about our normal routine for closing up, which includes cleaning, taking out trash, etc. We have a safe that we keep against the wall right next to the till full of pre-made bags of nickels for customers. We have to make sure it's filled every night before we leave, so my manager asked me to grab some buckets of nickels out of the photo booth. The arcade is pretty small, so we don't have anywhere else to store our trashed ring pop buckets full of used nickel bags, except for inside our terrible photo booth. Each of us also have a designated set of keys that have a colored tag on it. I have black keys that night. So I go over to the photo booth, open it up with the black keys, and start pulling buckets of nickels out. I keep the keys in the lock where we're pulling buckets out. We make $5 bags and $2 bags. I'm wimpy, so I can't lift the $5 buckets, so I call over my coworker to come and help me. His job that night was to take out all the trash. It's a rule that the doors have to be locked the whole time the manager is counting out, so he just left all the trash bags behind the door of the photo booth. All of the trash bags were tied off in a knot. We finish filling the safe just as my manager finishes counting out, so he takes the half-empty bucket of nickels from under the counter, puts it in the photo booth, and closes the door. It's about 1:30 a.m. We're all tired and waiting for our manager to give us the okay to clock out. He's checking to make sure everything's been done. Then he gets to the cabinet that we keep our keys in. He says that the black keys are missing. I tell him that I had the black keys and begin to look by the photo booth since I know that was the last time I used them. They're nowhere to be found. none of us get to leave until the keys are found, so we're all looking everywhere. Inside the safe, everyone's pockets, inside the photo booth, underneath everything, and still nothing. My manager decides to look at the security camera that points at the photo booth to see what could have happened to them. He finds the exact moment I open the door with the black keys and watches me and my coworker move nickel buckets to the safe. He then watches himself put the remaining nickels into the photo booth, close the door, and pull out green keys from the lock. Green keys are the set the manager carries. There isn't footage of me ever taking the black keys out of the lock, nor is there footage of the black keys falling out of the lock or anything like that. The only thing he can think of is that they must have fallen into the trash bags my coworker had placed right next to the door, which, as I mentioned, all of them were tied off. So we have ticket stations that you feed tickets into and they get shredded up, then split into trash bags that get very heavy and very big. I'm only 5'2" and I weigh 95 pounds. I have never taken out these trashes because I literally cannot lift them. They're bigger than me. My coworker that had the job of taking out trash took out the ticket station trash as well. However, it was earlier in the evening before we closed for the night. None of the trash bags he put next to the photo booth door were from the ticket station. Now, my manager just decides to hop in the dumpster and search for the keys, because the owner gets really angry when the keys are lost. He worked a double, and we all want to leave, so I just tell him I'll take the blame for losing the keys and that he needs to go home and sleep. However, he doesn't listen to me and just keeps ripping open all the trash bags. My coworker that took out trash told him not to rip open the ones with tickets in them because he took them out way before the black keys were lost. Again, he doesn't listen and just starts digging through heaps of tickets and shreds, and sure enough, there they were, at the very bottom of the bag, which means they had to have either been shoved down to the bottom or dropped in the bag at the end of the previous night when the bags were replaced. Thoughts? I think it's worth mentioning that the arcade was previously an auto shop, and I have heard strange voices on multiple occasions. However, I always thought it was just my ears messing with me since the arcade is really loud. I've heard of objects in areas that are haunted being teleported through the process of, what do they call that? A poltergeist. However, I'm not really too sure, and after this experience, I'm very confused. I live in New Zealand and I regularly trap possums in a patch of forest next to a rather old cemetery. The area surrounding my trap line is full of poverty, drug abuse, and violence. I'm very experienced in the bush and can tell the difference between animals judging from their tracks and calls. So my dog has been terrified of the area for the past 3 weeks. Usually he follows me everywhere, but he's been refusing to cross into the forestry block next to the cemetery. Every time I've managed to get him into the trees, he gets spooked and runs home. He's never had a problem here before, but lately, he refuses to go near the place. Now, for the actual event, I was checking my traps by myself without my dog around 9:30 p.m. last night. It was incredibly quiet, which is strange because usually you would hear possums moving around and animal calls. I got through my trap line without any incident. To exit the forestry block, you have to cross over a fence bordering the cemetery. As I approached the fence, I heard a quick, deep grunt noise. I passed it off as a tree moving or an animal or something and didn't take any notice. While climbing over the fence, I heard another slightly longer, more guttural growl. It was low in pitch and sounded somewhere in between a dog and a human growl, but much deeper and hoarser sounding. Understandably, this scared the crap out of me, and I jumped the fence and began scanning the trees with my spotlight to try to catch some eye shine or something. I heard the growl one last time, but right next to the fence, and at that point, I just got out of there. I'm posting this here because I'm not sure what to make of it. I'm experienced in identifying animals, and I know the area well, and I've never experienced anything like this. The only animals in the area apart from birds are possums and possibly wild pigs. I'm familiar with the noises that both of these animals make, and neither of them could produce a noise like it. I'm going to return to the area tonight with my gun and search for tracks and animal signs to try to make sense of this. I'm interested in hearing what you make of this as well. To give you guys some background info, I started a job as this lady's personal assistant for half the day and then her kid's nanny the other half. She bought this house near Seattle that was built in the 1960s and has only had one previous owner. The guy died, but apparently not in the house. I started my job in April, and after a week or two, while I was watching her 6-year-old, the doorbell rang. Now, from where we were sitting, I have full view of the front and no one was there. The kid goes, "Oh, that happens sometimes. The doorbell rings, but no one is there." I brush it off as a wiring issue since she had the house remodeled. So life continues and the doorbell rings here and there a few times a week, but then one day as I'm making the kid a snack, he tells me, "The front door just cracked open." So I check, and it was a bit cracked, and I brushed it off as not having closed the door all the way when we got to the house. Until I went to go shut it all the way, when a minute later, the door freaking cracks open again. I freaked out at this point and went to shut it again and made sure I slammed it shut. A few minutes later, we heard it crack open again, so I just locked it. An hour later, the doorbell rang and I was ready to get out of that house. Last week, I was upstairs putting away laundry, and as I'm coming down the stairs, I freaked since the door was cracked, and literally as I shut the door and locked it, the doorbell rings. I've never freaked out so much. Then yesterday, the kid and I are sitting there when the doorbell rings, but this time it was a different doorbell tone that is not similar whatsoever to their current tone. The kid goes, "That's not our door ring." And I say, "I know." I go outside and start messing with the doorbell to see if there's any way possible the doorbell could make that sound that it did, and there's no way possible. I swear the owner who lived there before's doorbell rang, and it was some glitchy Matrix stuff. After that I said, "If there is someone here, you are not welcome here. Please leave us and the family who lives here alone." This morning I was leaving with the kid, and as I was getting ready to shut the door, I stopped because I heard faint walking around upstairs, and then something from the shelf fell in the kitchen, and I never left so fast. So what is going on? If someone is here, why do they keep ringing the doorbell? And how did they make it ring to a different tone? Freaky. Let me start by explaining that about a month or so ago, my cat that I had for 11 years passed away. I had 2 cats at the time, and my other cat was left alone. She had never been in a single cat household. I didn't intend to get another cat, but my father and fiancé felt I needed another one to help me heal. My dad took it upon himself to find me a kitten, so I have 2 cats again. My cats always wear collars with tags on them. My cat who had passed had been wearing his when he died and had been buried with it. It's sort of a symbolic thing for me. My 2 remaining cats have collars with tags also, but last night I had bathed them and taken the collars off till they dried. Last night while I was in bed, maybe at about 2 a.m., I heard the familiar clang of one of my cat's tags clanging against one of the glass food dishes. My first thought was that someone was finishing their dinner, but I quickly realized that both my cats were in bed with me, one on each side sleeping right against my legs, and neither had their collars on. I had heard stories before about people hearing, feeling, or seeing a pet after it passes, but I had never experienced that before. I didn't get out of bed to look. There was nothing, no one in the house that could have been making that sound. Besides, it's a very distinct sound when you hear it. I kinda just stayed in bed and cried until it stopped. I really miss my boy. And not long after the above story occurred, while lying in bed, playing with my phone, I felt a cat jump up on my bed. The door was closed and there were no cats in the room at the time. As an immediate reaction, I put out my hand to pet the cat, but there was nothing there. Moments later, I felt it jump off the bed. This was something my late cat, Jesse, did often. Every night at least once, he would jump up onto the bed, sit there a moment, looking at me before jumping down and leaving. My fiancé and I always joked that he was doing his rounds and making sure I was still there. This time, I didn't get upset and cry. I just said, "Good night." So the first encounter isn't one I really remember. My mom tells me this every now and then. Apparently when I was around 1, I started waving at the side of my bed for like 3 days. My mom asked what I was waving at, and I said Grandpa, great-grandfather. No, I had never met my great-grandfather. He died in a war before I was even born. It's 9:19 and my mom's asleep. I'll ask in the morning and edit this, so... A few days later, I had apparently seen a picture of him and pointed at the picture of him and said, Grandpa, but remember he died before I was born. The second encounter that I remember was when I was 12. We were moved into an apartment and I picked the room without a closet. Closets make me feel really uncomfortable and I don't know why. So when I moved into my room, there was already a bookshelf in the room. It was pressed up against the wall in the corner. The bookshelf looked like it was falling apart, so we moved it out of my room. Behind the bookshelf was a small little door, and I wish I had a picture, but like I said, this was when I was 12, 17 now. When I grabbed a flashlight and crawled into the small room, I felt really bad. I honestly felt like I shouldn't be there, and it felt like my insides were twisting. My cousins didn't seem to feel it, and they hung out in there, but I avoided it and begged my mom to move. It just felt so wrong, but she nailed the door shut and painted over it. We lived there for 2 more years and eventually moved. The third experience was when we moved into the apartment we are in now. I instantly didn't like it. The room that was supposed to be my room was horrible. The floor was soaked and the rug looked like it was burnt, so we changed the rugs, but I still felt uncomfortable and sick being in that room. The small walk-in closet didn't help. My aunt who runs a crystal shop saged my room and my closet and put clear crystals in each corner of my room. What made it worse was that my room was right next to the basement door and I hated the basement. I still do. She saged the basement doorway and put 2 black smooth rocks on each side of the door. I don't know what they're for. I stayed in my room for a month but then switched to a different one. This one is fine except my closet. I have the closet door tied shut. I really hate closets. Now, a few paranormal things have happened to me since living in this apartment. 1, I've been touched multiple times. 2, I felt someone or something laying up against me in my bed. I thought it was my dog at first, but then I remembered my mom didn't let my dog in my room, so that freaked me out. 3, I've heard someone snoring in my ear next to me in my bed. Now, my dog wasn't allowed to sleep in my room at the time, so it wasn't him. I laid awake for a whole hour listening to someone snoring, and finally it stopped. That really freaked me out for a while. And 4, whenever I'm taking a shower, it will sound like the bathroom door opens and closes, but when I check, no one is there. The shower curtain will move, and I will see shadows outside the curtains. That's all I can remember for now, but like I mentioned at the beginning, this is what I need help with. So I mentioned a little higher up that I hate my basement. And I seriously do. Every time I go down there, I feel like I'm being watched, and I feel like there's things I can't see around me. I feel like I'm trapped, and it's always feeling like something is right behind me down there. Then when coming upstairs, I always run and it feels like something is chasing me, and one of the rocks that was at the top of the stairs somehow flew down the stairs and broke. Everyone in the house promised me that they didn't do it, and the angle it was sitting at wouldn't just fall. Also, it's a rock. It had to be going really fast to break. But this is what I need help with. I have 5 dogs, and none of them seem bothered by the basement. They don't even give it a second look, and 2 of them have gone down there repeatedly, no reaction. They're supposed to see ghosts, or at least sense them, I thought. If they're fine with our basement and sense nothing wrong, then what in God's name is wrong with me? Why does the basement scare me so much? Why do I feel so wrong being down there? Please, someone help me with this, because I don't understand. My name is Ari. I am Albanian, but I was born and still living in Greece. 6 years ago, after my parents got divorced, me, my mom, and my brother moved to a new house, since my father was, and still is, stupid enough and didn't let us stay in our old one. So we found a really good place, really cheap to rent and quite quiet. But it is really close to our city's graveyard. It was, and still is, creepy to wake up every morning and see the graves, especially at night. This explains the reason why the rent was so cheap. By the time we moved here, I was 12. I am now 18, and I can say that I kinda got used to the idea of living close to the graveyard. It's like 100 meters away from my front door, and yes, there have been lots of weird things that have happened around this place, especially to our place. One of the craziest of them happened a few weeks ago. I was smoking on my balcony, watching the sky and the graves, talking on my mobile phone with my somewhat boyfriend. We were talking about an hour. Then he asked me what time it was. I opened my lock screen, and while doing that, I checked my neighbor's house, which is opposite my balcony and next to the graveyard. Like, imagine walking outside the graveyard to get home. So, I noticed that my neighbors had left the lights on, and they neither had closed the windows nor the shutters. I told my boyfriend at the time that it was 3:33. He told me, "You know what time it is, don't you?" Of course I knew, and I was pooping my pants because while I was staring at the inside of the house, I noticed the two kids of the family wearing white clothes and something white on their face. I had no idea why they were wearing white masks, really. I've been to their place once. I've been there for the older son's birthday. I don't usually go to children's birthday parties, but I had to babysit the younger a few times while he was a baby in my place, so I got invited. I knew the inside of their house, and I knew the family. They were standing looking at the wall in between the window and balcony door of their house, right on the one side of their living room. In a few words, they were standing looking at the wall, just staring. Then they started moving their heads left and right. They moved their heads so slowly, it gave me chills. I was trying to understand what they were trying to do. My boyfriend was talking to me, and I wasn't paying attention. I froze watching the kids. Then my boyfriend shouted to get my attention, and by that time I had 2% battery left on my phone. I told him what was happening. He thought I was joking, so I took a picture and sent it to him. He freaked out. I freaked out. He told me to not look at that direction, but I was so horrified I wasn't able to stop looking. I was like, "What are you talking about? Looking or not, that won't stop them. What are they doing anyway?" Then the older kid looked at me. He stopped moving his head and he was staring at me. He and I were looking at each other for about 10 minutes. I realized that my phone died of battery, and I stood up, took my stuff, and went inside my house. I couldn't get a wink of sleep that night. And the craziest news, the next day, the family which was living in that house went away. I'm not sure where they went, but they were gone for about 3 days or so, and I've never really seen them do that. Every time I pass by those neighbors, I change my route, and I'm honestly thinking about leaving my house too. I want to take my family and run as far away as I possibly can. I am questioning myself. What were those two kids doing that late at night? They're supposed to be almost in elementary school age. Why are they awake late at night with white paint on their face and swaying their head back and forth? And why did they disappear the next day? Does this happen regularly? And why did I have to be the one to witness this? Hey friends, thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe and click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, /LetsReadOfficial, and give and receive feedback from the community, and maybe even hear it featured here on the channel. And grab early access to all future narrations for just $1 a month on Patreon, and maybe even pick up some Let's Read merch on Spreadshirt.com. Links in the bio. Thanks so much, friends, and I'll see you again soon.